My name is Chris Galliers. I'm president of the International Ranger Federation, joined by Mónica Alvarez Malvido, who is also works for the International Ranger Federation, and she is the Federation Development Officer, and she is based in Mexico. We are going to share this presentation, so I'll do the first part, and then she will go into the second part. But I think one of the most important things is to start off in just giving you a sense of what we mean by a ranger. The challenge is in the term itself, that when we talk about rangers, not everyone uses the term rangers to define the work that how we perceive the ranger work to be. So we have got this short little explainer video. I think it's really a very useful video that will give us a good starting point into the presentation.
Picture a wildlife ranger. It's likely no two people will imagine the same thing, as there is no one definition or job description of a ranger. Their profession is little understood, yet these brave conservation professionals are the backbone of global biodiversity management and protection, making them indispensable to the very essence of life on Earth. They are called wildlife wardens, forest guards, scouts, and watchers. They come from small villages and big cities. Rangers are diverse in ethnicity and gender. They work in government positions and private roles. They are indigenous peoples and multicultural guardians. They are found in urban parks, local communities, and remote areas, protecting our lands, freshwater ecosystems, and oceans. Rangers are vital to communities, countries, and our future, protecting our planet and ensuring that every person has access to wild spaces and global resources. Given their essential roles in preserving biodiversity through the protection of valuable life support systems and ecosystem services, the ranger sector should be well-staffed and rangers well-respected and acknowledged. More than 7,000 rangers from 465 sites across 28 countries have shared their successes, their challenges, and they've told the world what they need. They need your support for more resources. If we work together to remove obstacles and dismantle inequities to ensure that natural resources are adequately protected for those that depend on them, we will greatly improve the overall impact of rangers. Our world needs them, and they need allies and advocates. We must prioritize and value rangers so they receive the honor and recognition they deserve. Support rangers, support our planet, and join the global Rangers Deserve More movement.
Right, so hopefully that gives you a good sense of what the work of a ranger is. I'm sure many of you know their work quite well, so it's not too foreign. However, we do work across, rangers work across many different terrains and environments, and often we forget that they work in the terrestrial and aquatic environments as well. So we are going to, we've got this definition of a ranger. This definition is actually something that was defined quite recently because there was no definition. And it was widely consulted to try and come up with that definition. So I think we can, it's, as the video said, it really is a diverse job and one that is also very challenging. It has a number of employers, and these employers can be either state or indigenous communities, members of different communities as well. So the International Ranger Federation was established in 1992 on the 31st of July. And as such, World Ranger Day is now celebrated on the 31st of July. We have a mission to develop, advance, and promote throughout the world community the ranger profession and its critical role in the conservation of natural and cultural resources. The International Ranger Federation has also recently embarked on the development of a strategy. It hasn't had one prior to this, and now we have a vision, and that vision is really revolving around, as you can see on the on the diagram on the right around ranges for 30 by 30. And that talks to the Global Biodiversity Framework, and specifically Target 3 set out in the Kunming Montreal targets that were established at the COP15 in 2022. So that's our time frame, and there's a number of targets that are tasks and objectives that align from our side to those international targets. We also have our vision is to create a world where rangers as professionals work in close collaboration with governments, local communities, indigenous peoples, and other stakeholders in an accountable manner, which is very important. And also, it's also very important to understand that rangers are not there just securing wilderness areas and wildlife, but also securing important heritage and cultural sites for society. Our strategy is built on 3 pillars. That is to advance the ranger profession. It is a very, very important part because internationally, in terms of the International Labour Organization, the ranger profession is actually not recognized. So we have a lot of work to do to get the profession recognized by all the national governments that are signatory to the International Labour Organization. We also look at developing ranger networks and maintaining that. And we are a membership-based organization, and I'll talk to that a little bit later. And then obviously it's about ensuring that we have the ability to sustain the organization to meet its objectives. Just in terms of the IRF structure, we have a board, an IRF board, which is an elected board. We also have regional representatives from our 7 regions. We have Africa, Asia, Europe, North America, Central America, and South America and Oceania. Below that, we have regional ranger associations as well in many of the regions. Africa, we have the Game Rangers Association of Africa. In Asia, the Ranger Federation of Asia. Europe, the European Ranger Federation. North America doesn't have one as yet, and however, throughout the United States, there is a grouping. It just hasn't formed a regional association because it is essentially with Canada. Central and South America are now together under one umbrella with the Latin American Ranger Federation, which has recently been formed. And then we have Oceania, and that's the Council of Ranger Associations in that part of the world. Underneath that, we have national and subnational ranger associations, and that allows us to have real interaction with regards to rangers on the ground. And the important part here is that we have good information flow right from the needs and voices of rangers on the ground that can be channeled up to a global level, and vice versa as well, where information and communication can flow from an international level right down to the ranger on the ground. That is our objective. Obviously, communication with rangers in far-off places is one of the biggest challenges we face. Rangers often are working in remote areas where communication is not very good. However, it's a very important part to have these ranger associations that do really do a lot for rangers in their respective regions. Our membership, we have 189 members. Any organization can be a member of the IRF. Ranger associations are classified as full members, and any ranger stakeholder supporters can join as associate members. We have a number of members in different parts. Latin America combined now has the greatest number, followed by Europe. We also have good representation in Asia that seems to be growing, and Africa as well. So since 2019, which is when we had our last World Ranger Congress, which was in Nepal, we had 102 members, and that we have seen steady growth to 189 members currently. That is a good sign. It shows that there's relevance in terms of the International Ranger Federation, but also that there's growth at a national level in terms of ranger associations. So our role is to try and promote that and support those associations in their development and support true rangers on the ground. So one of the important parts around networking is we have been involved in arranging a number of regional congresses. So just going clockwise from the top left, we had the European Ranger Federation that gathered in 2023. We also had the first ever Asian Ranger Forum that took place in India also in 2023. We had the CORA, which was the Oceania Congress, was the first ever there as well. That took place in New Zealand. And then the African Ranger Congress, which took place in Kasane in Botswana. We also recently had the formation, as I mentioned, of the formalization of the Latin American Ranger Federation. And we were there in May, so this is very recent. And this was held in Peru, where many ranger associations from around the region came together to formalize the constitution of the organization and elect members. So now we have really good regional representation with good links to rangers on the ground in that area. So just a bit of history. Since the establishment of the IRF, we've had a number of World Ranger Congresses. You can see them listed there with the most, I was fortunate enough to have attended the last three in Arusha, and then there was the one in Estes Park, which was fantastic. And then the last one, as I mentioned, was in Chitwan in Nepal in 2019. So very soon we will be holding the next one. There's been a bit of a delay. We usually try and hold this every 3 to 4 years. But the delay with COVID has resulted in us only hosting it now. The next World Ranger Congress is going to be here in the south of France, which is really fantastic. It allows us to also bring in a stronger marine component because it is right on the coast of the south of France. So we're really looking forward to that, and we should have about 400 rangers from around the world attending. One of the other things that the IRF does is to look to honor all the rangers that have passed away in the line of duty. The IRF has been keeping records dating back until starting in about at the end of the 1800s, and just trying to track ranger deaths. As I mentioned, we try and gather the names of those rangers that have passed away in the line of duty, so that we can remember them on World Ranger Day. This is last year's Roll of Honor, as we call it, and we can see the ranger deaths that occurred. Unfortunately, again, we saw the majority of these ranger deaths are in Asia and followed closely by Africa. Also, unfortunately, we find that many of these deaths are as a result of homicides. In a paper that we did where we analyzed the past 10 years of ranger deaths, we found that 42% of the ranger deaths are as a result of homicides. But there are a number of causes as well. So you can see the number of ranger deaths since 2009 has been increasing. Obviously, we got to rationalize that a little bit by the fact that reporting might have improved. The ability for us to track those ranger deaths and record them has also improved through better communication. So it's not necessarily, we believe that there's still many ranger deaths that have gone unrecorded. However, the trend seems to be that the number of rangers that are dying is on the increase. And this is a very big concern. to us, particularly in those areas such as Asia and Africa. So, as I said, there's a number of causes for the deaths of the rangers, and those are sometimes caused by other things such as accidents, drownings, and also fires. So we also, looking at the correlation between things like climate change as well, and the number of ranger deaths. We also see that, as this slide reflects, that there's many threats out there for rangers in that some of them don't have access to clean drinking water. 80% do not have access to first aid and emergency training, and 45% do not have access to medical insurance. So, these kind of things are very important and sometimes can be life-saving. And that is also why we see a number of ranger deaths that we believe are unnecessary, particularly where we can improve training, improve the skills of the rangers, and also improve the support and resources for them to be effective in doing their job. So, as I mentioned, the Chitwan, we held the last World Ranger Congress in Chitwan in Nepal in 2019. We had about 550 attendees, and about 70 to 80 different countries were represented, which was fantastic. So there were rangers from all around the world. And what happened was that we came out with a declaration from that Congress, which really carried the voices of rangers. And in that declaration, what we wanted to see was that it wasn't something that just, was the voice of rangers captured in a document and ended up on a shelf. We wanted to turn it into a real living document where we use that as IRF, as the board as a guideline to direct our work until the next World Ranger Congress. And that was, I think, very important. So there was a long list of things, as you can imagine, in terms of what the challenges that were being faced by rangers and what was being asked of the IRF to do in response to those challenges. So out of that, we realized that the challenges were far too big and far too many for us as the IRF to take on alone. And therefore, we looked at creating a partnership. And so the Universal Ranger Support Alliance was established. And you can see the partners that are there are some of the large global conservation organizations. Many of these organizations, to some degree, actually are sort of competitors to each other. However, it was fantastic to see them all coming together, united, to address the challenges that rangers were facing. And I think that has been hugely valuable from IRF side to have that level of support and at the same time have that level of influence at that global level. Some of those organizations employ rangers and obviously fund projects, etc. So they fully understand the ranger ecosystem. Out of that, we created an action plan, which we have been trying to implement. And the action plan, in summary, touches on advocacy and representation, ranger support, and sector capacity, employment and welfare, equity and equality, and then also importantly, looking at community relations, conduct, and accountability.
Okay, so now that we have the good context of IRF said by Chris, we're going to talk more about what is the ranges for the 30 by 30 framework. How are we really going to achieve the expectations for rangers to conserve biodiversity for the 2030? So again, I'm Mónica Galliers, Development Officer at IRF. Thank you. So, okay, so as Chris mentioned, we've been working with ORSA, and ORSA has been a partnership that has been super helpful for IRF to sort of get all these materials, standards, and tools and guidelines available. And the intention of all these documents that you can see on the screen, and we have many more, is that they can really be useful for the ranger workforce globally. We recognizing and remembering that our definition of ranger is very diverse. As Chris mentioned, they could be hired by the state, community, private. So these materials that we have developed are adaptable to any ranger in the world. The intention of these documents usually is to adapt them to local context. So an important paper came out in 2020, at the end of 2022, where in Nature Sustainability, that it's really the first census of how many rangers there are around the world. This is the best numbers we have, and the results are that there are only 286,000 rangers in terrestrial sites, and that what that really means is 35% of what is really required. And this is a bit worrying and a bit, it's important to notice this, because if we are expecting to reach 30% of the planet protected by 2030, we need to put attention of the ranger numbers, as many other aspects that we will touch later on. But in summary, we would need 1.5 million additional rangers to protect 30% of the planet. So we've been working with ORSA and with other partners, as you can see in the pictures, to reach these spaces. And it's important to mention that rangers usually are not in these important, COPs or international events. Usually the ranger voice is quite, it's not heard in those spaces. So it's, with the help of ORSA, we've been really trying to reach those spaces. And it was very fortunate that we were present at the COP15. You can see Chris and our Asia rep there. We had a pavilion with Jeff to show this, to show the voice of rangers, to show what the reality is, and how really rangers are needed to be able to achieve global targets, and not just biodiversity targets, but all sorts of targets. So just to remembering, in case of some of you don't know, what is the Global Biodiversity Framework, the Target 3 for 2030 says, or also known as the 30 by 30 target. It mentions that we need to cover at least 30% of the planet protected by conserved areas or other effective measures, in Spanish is OMEX, which is OECM's, other effective conservation measures, by 2030. And that's very ambitious. That's what actually is needed to be protected for the well-being of humanity and other species, obviously, but this needs to, in special particular sites of biodiversity and where there are sites of function and ecosystem services. This has to be, taking into account that it's equitable governance, that it has effective management, that its systems are in place, that it's representative, that it's well connected, well represented, and other qualitative aspects, while ensuring the rights of the indigenous peoples and communities, integrate into wider landscapes, and assuring sustainable use of resources. So as you can see, this is very, very ambitious, and it is usually not, these targets usually don't take into account what is needed in terms of human resources or human capacity to be able to achieve this. That is why we created the Ranger 30 by 30 framework. So in a summary, this would be we need a set of standards, tools, guidance, and projects to establish a professional workforce global that can ensure effective management of this 30% of the planet protected by 2030. So how we see it, and this has been, as again, developed with support with ORSA, is we have sort of the 3 C's that we call. We need conditions, we need conduct, we need competencies to be able to have a professional workforce around the world that is also recognized and that has standards. So we will touch on each of these different pillars. And we use a lot this image because it's really a workforce planning. As Chris mentioned, we're not recognized, rangers are not recognized yet as a profession in the International Labour Organization. So that is one of our objectives, and where we're dedicating a lot of efforts, is to get the profession recognized, because that's going to be very important in order to achieve or generate certain pressure in other countries. Maybe the US, is very particular, but in other countries, it's very diverse how the rangers are in terms of conditions and competencies. So touching on conduct is very important. So this is actually the first think this was the first outcome that we had as IRF. And before all these materials are available, once I finish, I'm going to put them on the chat so you can have access to all these resources. But what's very interesting about the Ranger Code of Conduct, that it's IRF, is how it was done. It was really a very intense consultation process to rangers globally and ranger employers or people that work with rangers. So we had above 1,000 responses from rangers everywhere in the world. So it was really built by rangers for rangers. It's not a code that we just invented. It's a global code that should be adapted to different local contexts. Along with the IRF Code of Conduct, we have guidelines for adoption. And it's important to say that we have had this document that it's 7 pages long. It's not super exhaustive. It has been translated to over 15 languages, along with the guidelines for adoption. So it's really been really valuable because now it includes the ranger definition, it includes the values that all rangers should have, and it touches on the different items that you see on the screen: professionalism, integrity and transparency, human rights and dignity, legality, confidentiality, safety, response to violations, use of force, protection of persons, and firearms for those cases, specific cases that rangers use firearms, that it's a reduced number. So it's very general. It's really a way of showing, like a code of conduct, how rangers should be accountable and behave. And it's been really useful for the rangers themselves. For example, in some cases, they don't have clarity of what are their responsibilities, and sometimes they perform even more than they should. So the code of conduct adapted to their context could be a very useful tool for themselves as well to have clarity on their roles. On capacity, we have a big need in capacity. Around 40% of rangers are inadequately trained. So that's something to focus on. And this also considering that if we need to grow the ranger workforce up 1 to 1.5 million, well, they need to be equally trained with the capacity in place. Because poor capacity we've seen leads to poor performance and increased risk. So some suggestions, actions we're taking is we work with employers to update job descriptions using IRF and ORSA and IUCN competences. We just have, well, not just have, last year we launched our competences, global competences. And it's a very useful document. It has, sorry, I can't remember the exact number, around 25 competences that could be applicable to any ranger. And again, this document was, the process of this document, of making it, was a consultative process to rangers globally and to people that employ rangers globally. So we put them together, those competences that any ranger should have on the ground. It doesn't matter if it's hired by the state, if it's a community ranger, it doesn't matter. It's just the global competences that every ranger should have. It also includes some specialized and senior competencies, but yeah, so the intention of this document is that it's really used and adopted to different cases. For example, we've seen in Europe and in Asia that they are adopting this, and in Africa as well, these ranger competencies to their curricula in training colleges for rangers or when they're hiring. So that's the intention of it. And of course, this can be also useful to advocate for official protected and conserved area training budgets, to work with employers and providers to design programs that cover all the required competencies and to promote the workplace learning and mentoring. Now we have conditions. And in conditions, we use this picture that maybe you wouldn't believe it, but that's a ranger station in Asia, in a very famous tiger reserve. So that really shows the reality of rangers globally, the conditions they live in. But there's a lot of conversation regarding of human rights and safeguarding of human rights, and that's also why we have the code of conduct, that it's super, super important. However, we need to think that rangers themselves also need to have their rights, be aware of their rights, that sometimes that doesn't happen. So some numbers that we have from there was a report, Life on the Frontline, developed by WWF a few years ago. It's a global study of 7,000 rangers surveyed. It's a perception survey. So 31% said that they've never had access to communications devices during patrol. 34% do not have the skills they need to deliver their job. 57% had no access to clean drinking water or basic equipment. 48% said, believe that medical treatment is adequate when needed. That means that the other half doesn't think the same. And 1 in 4 rangers that year contracted malaria. So that's this, and Chris mentioned it as well. 50% of rangers do not have the basic equipment and skills. And this really is a issue. If you remember the data from the Roll of Honor and how we track ranger deaths, there are many rangers that could be avoided if the better conditions were in place, or the better training and capacity as for firefighting, for swimming, and very basic equipment could make the difference. So what we have done in this component, since, as I mentioned, it's not recognized yet by the ILO, what we did is we worked on a global standard with people that have worked with the International Labor Organization, and we actually received feedback from them to what are the minimum conditions that any ranger should have. And so this document that I'm going to share at the end touches on training, accommodation, equipment and subsistence, insurance and compensation for accident and injury at work, labor inspection, safety, health and security at work, and harassment and discrimination at work, and social security. So the idea is that the sector of the rangers should be considered as any other sector in terms of rights at the International Labor Organization. So we have developed a checklist to make everything easier, that it's also available in our website, of the 10 questions to ask. And this is really a way of encouraging donors, funders, NGOs, agencies to use this checklist based on the Rangers 430 by 30 framework to ensure that rangers who you all support or who agency support receive the support and guidance they require to do their job. So we have these are the 10 questions. For example, are there sufficient rangers for the task assigned to them? Is the ranger workforce representative and diverse as it could be? Do rangers have adequate equipment and infrastructure to do their jobs? Do rangers have insurance and healthcare? Are rangers fairly and adequately contracted, paid, and reimbursed? Do rangers have a code of conduct that guides their work? What is the relationship between rangers and local communities? Are adequate measures in place for safeguarding human and indigenous rights? Are the skills and competences required by rangers clearly defined? Are rangers adequately trained? And is there follow-up on training and capacity building? So lastly, we touch on inclusive workforce. That is super important, and it has been mentioned before as well. So what have we been doing in terms of inclusiveness? It's important to mention that the reality is that only 3 to 11% of the ranger workforce are women. So that's the best data that we have, 3 to 11%. So we developed it's a report that looks for addressing, using the best data available, but it also touches on challenges and opportunities and recommendations for ranger employers and ranger teams in how to improve that gender gap towards in terms of gender. So I really recommend this document. We have it also translated in many languages, and it really touches on how to address these huge gaps from different perspectives. But we know that gender is only one part of inclusivity. IRF is also part of the Forest and Communities Initiative, that it's a partnership with the Prince of Albert of Monaco Foundation, the World Commission on Environmental Law, the Global Forest Coalition, and Indigenous Forum on Biodiversity. So together we have this call for action, and I invite you to have a look at it as well, in how rangers are really shown as because there's a tendency to divide rangers from the communities, and we are trying to change the stereotypes. We're trying to showcase that rangers are often part of the communities themselves, so they need to be protected as well. So this call for action really addresses a couple of needs for community rangers and in their that they should be insured. What is in work in progress? We're developing our principles and equity, equality, and rights in the ranger workforce. This is general for all ranger associations, and we hope to have it finalized very, very soon. And it's just the basic principles that everyone should have in terms of equity, equality, and rights. And just before going back to Chris, something that we're working on that it's bringing very important information is we have the first Global State of the Ranger Report 2024 unpublished yet, but here's some data. We have developed in IRF the first state of the ranger where the profession is currently. So we could track it. The aim is to develop this report every World Ranger Congress, 3 to 4 years, so we can track if there has been progresses or the other way, or if we need to focus more in certain aspects to improve the profession globally. So we have had over 1,700 ranger surveys, and we included the employers as well to balance the reports. We have had over 500 employer surveys from 89 countries, so it really touches, it's very, very representative globally. And this is some of the data that is coming out. 56% report to have adequate health and safety training. So that means almost the other half does not feel that way. And 66% have basic medical services if sickness or in accidents if they are working. But the other 35% do not think the same. And this is a bit worrying, and something we're working on is only 45% have life insurance. So we're working with ORSA in IRF with ORSA to talk to global insurance companies to make this, to address this. Rangers need to be better. Rangers need life insurance. And there are good examples of, for example, the Game Rangers Association of Africa, that they have a scheme that they have an insurance, Ranger Protect, I think it's called, and they do have certain insurance for rangers. And this comes from the association, per se, not from themselves. So yeah, that's something to work on. And something quite alarming that we need to focus on is only 55% have done an assessment to evaluate their performance as a ranger. Chris, you want to go on this one?
Yeah, thanks. Thank you, Mónica. So yeah, I think what's important is to just understand that the work of a ranger is important. It's becoming more so, particularly when we realize that based on our research that we really need to ramp up the numbers of rangers. Currently sitting at 286,000 to 1.5 million if we want to secure adequately secure, and as per target 3, where it says that we require effective conservation and management over 30% of the planet by 2030. So the question is, who's going to do that? And it's rangers that are going to be out there. And therefore, our belief is that we're not going to achieve that target, much like we didn't achieve the biodiversity targets that were set. But we're certainly not going to give ourselves a fighting chance unless we invest in a ranger workforce that is well supported, well trained, that has adequate conditions and skilled with the right equipment to do the job. And at the same time, then we might also end up ticking a lot of the other boxes of, for example, the Sustainable Development Goals. And we can see the list of Sustainable Development Goals that the work of the ranger actually ends up benefiting if we have rangers. So we also are looking at some innovative ways to sort of calculate the value of rangers, and from a monetary term, from a biological term as well. So there's a huge amount of information that's still to be learned about the work of rangers, and it almost seems like the role of rangers the ranger workforce is a forgotten one. We're playing sort of catch up compared to other professions like the nursing profession, or policing, or firefighting, etc. seem to be far more advanced. But I think we've got a long way to go, but we've made some good inroads in the last couple of years. But there's a long way to go. One of the things that we have been doing is really engaging with at a high level. So we had meetings in Brussels with a number of organizations, global organizations that fund a lot of conservation and environmental work in the EU. And then we were also in the US more recently engaging with the World Bank and other organizations like the Global Environmental Facility as well, to really ensure that when they invest in environmental projects, that they make sure that they invest in the ranges first. Because if they don't, we are not going to achieve these global targets. And at the end of the day, we certainly believe that that's obviously going to impact not only on biodiversity and mitigating climate change, but ultimately it's going to affect humanity as well. So on that note, I'd like to say thank you very much